We're beginning Chapter 5, Clinical Trials, A Broken Social Contract with Patients, of Deadly Medicines and Organized Crime, How Big Pharma Has Corrupted Healthcare by Peter Goetze. If clinical trials become a commercial venture in which self-interest overrules public interest and desire overrules science, then the social contract which allows research on human subjects in return for medical advance is broke. Jonathan Quick, World Health Organization Director of Essential Drugs and Medicines Policy. The social contract between researchers and patients was broken long before the WHO director warned against this in 2002. Epidemiologist Jan Vanderbroek has described why industry-sponsored drug trials are not research but marketing. In usual clinical or epidemiologic research, studies are repeated by others in different settings and by different means, looking for biases, flaws, and ways of remedying them, endlessly arguing whether the biases are remedied or not. That is the essence of open scientific debate and criticism, which is the only guarantee for progress. That is no longer possible with pharmaceutical products because the monopoly of the pharmaceutical industry of studies of its own products leads to persistently one-sided studies that can no longer be questioned by studies from other sides. Moreover, the one-sidedness cannot be seen from the public record. That is the published papers, without the possibility of open debate. Science simply ceases to exist. All data submitted to drug regulatory authorities should become public because these data are different from the published papers. Even better would be the independent funds for clinical research. Science philosopher Karl Popper would have come to the same conclusion. In The Open Society and Its Enemies, he depicts the totalitarian closed society as a rigidly ordered state in which freedom of expression and discussion of crucial issues are ruthlessly suppressed. Most of the time when I have tried to publish unwelcome truths about the drug industry, I have been exposed to the journal's lawyers. And even after I have documented that everything I say is correct and have been said before by others, I have often experienced that important bits have been removed or that my paper was rejected for no other reason than fear of litigation. This is one of the reasons I decided to write this book, as I have discovered that I have much more freedom when I write books. Popper would have viewed the pharmaceutical industry as an enemy of the open society. Rigorous science should put itself at risk of being falsified, and this practice should be protected against those who try to impede scientific understanding. As when industry intimidates those who discover harms of its drugs, protecting the hypotheses by ad hoc modifications, such as undeclared changes to the measured outcomes or the analysis plan once the sponsor has seen the results, or by designing trials that make them immune to refutation, puts the hypotheses in the same category as pseudoscience. In healthcare, the open democratic society has become an oligarchy of corporations whose interests serve the profit motive of the industry and shape public policy, including that of weakened regulatory agencies. Our governments have failed to regulate an industry which has become more and more powerful and almighty, and failed to protect scientific objectivity and academic curiosity from commercial forces. In the first half of the 20th century, drugs were very poorly researched before they were allowed onto the market. there weren't any demands that they should have been demonstrated to have a therapeutic or prophylactic effect. What was the most important was that they were not unduly harmful and not even that was adequately investigated. As a result, a number of drug catastrophes emerged and many dangerous drugs were withdrawn from the market after having harmed or killed many people. The thalidomide disaster marked a watershed in drug regulation. The drug, which was produced by a German drug maker, Grünenthal, was marketed for a broad range of indications, including pregnancy-induced nausea, although it hadn't been adequately tested in pregnant animals. Before long, the first reports of children being born with an extremely rare condition, phocomelia, which means lack of arms or legs, were submitted to Grünenthal. The company ignored the reports and didn't take any action, although the reports continued to flow in. It was a classical case of profits before patience. It didn't matter how seriously malformed the children were and how many they were, as long as the company managed to keep the reports secret. In the United States, an astute FDA scientist had concerns about the drug and refused to recommend approval. Because of her well-placed stubbornness, the drug never made it to the U.S. market, but its citizens weren't totally spared, as the company had distributed samples of the drug all over the country, even though it had not been approved. Thalidomide was withdrawn worldwide in 1962, and the disaster led to demands of extensive animal experiments and also that new drugs needed to have demonstrated their efficacy in randomized trials. These requirements had a major impact on the efficacy and safety of new drugs. Patients could now be more confident that the drugs their doctors prescribed were good for them. However, there was a huge backlog of drugs that had not been adequately tested and were still widely used. It took decades before most of these drugs disappeared, and some of them are still with us today, although we don't know whether they are effective and what their harms are. Armed with its new powers, the FDA actually did nothing that could raise eyebrows in the drug industry. It came up with a new categorization of drugs and required manufacturers to list in small print in their promotional materials. Ooh. The Food and Drug Administration has determined that this product is possibly effective. It would surely have been more honest to say that the old products were likely to be ineffective than to pull the wool over the public's eyes. Drug epidemiologist Jerry Avorn has explained what this really meant. There is not a shred of solid evidence on the entire planet Earth that this drug is of any use whatsoever for any purpose known to man or beast. But the manufacturer has successfully demanded additional years to study it, and we don't have the political clout to take it off the market until that unbearingly lengthy, foot-dragging process has run its course. The main purpose of requiring randomized trials was to ensure that useless drugs didn't make it onto the market. However, there was a problem with the regulatory requirements, which is still with us today, 50 years later. All that is required to demonstrate that a drug is effective is that a statistically significant effect has been found in 2 placebo-controlled trials. As I showed in the previous chapter, this can often be accomplished for drugs that have no beneficial effects. The drug companies give the impression that they play by the rules, seemingly following good clinical practice guidelines and other requirements for randomized trials. For example, using adequate randomization procedures and blinding and monitoring the trial sites to ensure that what is reported to the company is correct. However, There are numerous ways in which a drug company can manipulate its clinical trials to ensure that the results become useful for its salespeople, no matter what an honest approach to science would have shown. The manipulations are so common and serious that one of my colleagues said we should see published reports of industry trials as nothing else than advertisements for its drugs. To which I dryly remarked that industry trials do not even live up to EU requirements for advertising. Fucking EU. No person shall issue an advertisement relating to a relevant medicinal product unless that advertisement encourages the rational use of that product by presenting it objectively and without exaggerating its properties. It's not surprising that the drug industry manipulates its results. The difference between an honest and not so honest data analysis can be worth billions of euros.